The 7-day secret, what happened after he married her. The proposal that changed everything. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the bustling streets of Detroit. It was a city still recovering from years of struggle, where hope often seemed as rare as the sun itself. But for Jamal, a 23-year-old mechanic, the city was home, albeit a place where dreams were often dashed before they had a chance to sprout. Jamal's life hadn't been easy. Raised in a rundown neighborhood where survival often felt like the only goal, his childhood was marred by the absence of both his parents. His mother, a hard-working woman who had fought tooth and nail to keep their small family together, passed away when Jamal was just 10 years old. His father, once a proud man who had dreams of a better life, fell prey to the streets and was lost to addiction, never to return. Now, at 23, Jamal had no one left to depend on but himself. His younger sister was in foster care, and while Jamal had tried to stay in school, bills, hunger, and the pressure of surviving day to day forced him to drop out of community college. His days were filled with long shifts at a dirty auto repair shop owned by a grumpy old man who paid him just enough to get by. Yet Jamal wasn't a stranger to hard work. He'd learned early that the only way to move forward in life was to keep your head down and keep pushing. But that evening, everything changed. As Jamal returned to his small apartment carrying the weight of the day on his shoulders, he found a strange envelope slipped under his door. It was a handwritten note, the kind you rarely received in the digital age. The name on the front was unfamiliar, Mrs. Evelyn Harrington. He hesitated for a moment, holding the envelope in his hand as he stared at the elegant script on the front. His first thought was that it was probably some sort of scam. After all, who would send a personal letter in the middle of Detroit, of all places? Yet something about the handwriting felt real, almost familiar. His curiosity got the better of him. He tore open the envelope and pulled out the note inside. Jamal, I need to speak with you urgently. Minerva's Cafe, 6:30 p.m. Don't be late. The message was short and to the point. It had no signature, but the urgency in the tone made his heart skip a beat. He considered throwing the note away. It was probably just another one of those get-rich-quick schemes. But then again, his life had been full of missed opportunities, and the thought of having something, anything, change felt almost too tempting to ignore. Jamal glanced at the clock on his wall, 6:15 p.m. He had nothing to lose. When he arrived at Minerva's Cafe, he could immediately tell it wasn't the kind of place he'd normally step foot in. The cafe was small but beautifully furnished, with delicate lace curtains and soft jazz music playing in the background. There were only a few patrons scattered around the dimly lit room, all of them older, well-dressed, and seemingly well-to-do. At the back of the room, sitting near the window, was a woman who stood out among the crowd. She was tall, with silver hair pulled into an elegant bun, and her skin, while pale, was smooth, except for the crow's feet around her eyes. Her presence was commanding, despite her age. She wore an ivory trench coat, a black silk scarf, and a demeanor that suggested she was someone accustomed to being listened to. "Jamal," she said when she saw him walk in. Her voice was smooth, controlled, and as sharp as glass. "You came. That's good." Jamal stood at the entrance, feeling awkward in his one clean shirt. He couldn't help but feel out of place, like he had wandered into someone else's world. He approached cautiously. "Who are you?" Jamal asked. "How do you know my name?" The woman smiled faintly, her lips curling upward slightly. "Let's just say I know more about you than you think. I've done my research. You're talented, underpaid, and stuck in a cycle you didn't create. You're loyal and desperate." Jamal felt a chill run down his spine. "Okay, so what do you want from me?" The woman leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him uneasy. "I want you to marry me." The words hit Jamal like a punch to the gut. His brain couldn't even process the request, let alone form a response. He blinked, wondering if he had misheard her. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" "I want you to marry me," she repeated, her tone unflinching. "Legally, it will be a real marriage on paper. No romance, no intimacy, just companionship and appearances." Jamal stared at her, his jaw hanging open. "Lady, you're old enough to be my grandmother. Why the hell would I marry you?" The woman didn't flinch. "Because I'm offering you something no one else can. Freedom. A future." He took a step back, almost laughing in disbelief. "What's the catch?" She looked at him, almost sad, but still with the same cold composure. "There's always a catch, but not one you'll see. Not yet. All I need is for you to say yes. Marry me next week, live with me for 30 days, and after that, you can walk away with more than you ever had. Jamal's mind was racing. Every fiber of his being screamed that this was wrong, that this was crazy. But there was something about the offer, something about the way she spoke, so calm, so sure of herself, that made him hesitate. His bills were piling up, his sister was stuck in foster care, and his dreams of a better life seemed more and more unreachable by the day. And here, in front of him, was a woman offering him a way out, a golden ticket, wrapped in mystery. He swallowed hard, staring at the woman in front of him. The silence between them stretched on, long and heavy. Finally he spoke, his voice low and uncertain. Okay. The Mansion of Shadows. The next morning, the golden light from the rising sun crept through the thick curtains of Jamal's new bedroom, casting a faint glow over the luxurious furnishings. Everything in the room seemed foreign to him, too pristine, too perfect. He had never imagined a life like this, not even in his wildest dreams. The room was massive, with a king-sized bed, antique furniture, and a view of sprawling gardens that stretched far beyond what he could see. His clothes, the ones he had worn for years, worn jeans, old shirts, and battered sneakers, seemed out of place against the marble floors and velvet drapes. Jamal rolled out of bed, his body still adjusting to the reality of what he had just agreed to. He had married Evelyn just a day ago, but it already felt like a lifetime. The day before had passed in a blur. Quiet ceremony, no friends, no family. No, only the sterile faces of the lawyer and two strange witnesses, and the disorienting reality that he was now bound to a woman 42 years older than him, someone he barely knew. The mansion, the estate, it was like a world of its own. The driver who picked him up, the housekeeper, the strange cook Yvonne who barely smiled, everything felt scripted. Everyone played their roles, and Jamal was the newest actor in a play he didn't quite understand. Jamal paced the length of the room, trying to wrap his mind around the situation. How had he gotten here? Just 7 days ago, he was in his cramped apartment, struggling to survive, wondering how he would pay his bills, with his sister in the foster system. Now, he was married to Evelyn Harrington, an elegant woman who seemed as much an enigma as the mansion she lived in. The silence of the house was overwhelming. He'd expected more conversations, more interaction, but Evelyn had kept her distance, almost as if she were waiting for something. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching his door. A soft knock followed, and before Jamal could answer, the door creaked open. It was Evelyn, standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the morning light. She looked every bit the part of a mysterious, powerful woman, her silver hair pulled back into a tight bun, her expression unreadable. "Good morning, Jamal," she said softly, her voice smooth as velvet. "Morning," he replied, his tone flat. He wasn't sure what to say to her yet. He wasn't sure what any of this meant. "I trust you slept well," she continued, stepping into the room. "The house can be a bit overwhelming at first." Jamal nodded, but the question that had been nagging him all night lingered on his tongue. "Why me?" he asked, his voice a little more forceful than he'd intended. "What do you want from me, really? What is all this?" Evelyn regarded him for a moment, her gaze piercing. She stepped closer, and he could feel the weight of her presence, as if the air itself changed when she was near. "I told you before, Jamal," she said, her voice lowering, almost conspiratorial. "This marriage isn't about love, it's about securing the future, yours and mine. You're part of something much bigger than you realize. You were chosen, Jamal." "Chosen? Chosen for what?" Jamal's mind raced. There was something more to this, something hidden beneath the surface. But the truth was elusive, and Evelyn's calm demeanor made it hard to get any clear answers. She smiled faintly, though there was something cold about it. "You'll understand in time, but for now, let's go for a walk. The gardens are beautiful this time of year." Jamal was about to protest, but something in her voice stopped him. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the strange, unsettling calm that seemed to seep from her. Without saying anything else, he nodded. They walked through the mansion's grand hallways, the floors echoing with each of their steps. The house seemed to stretch on forever, with long corridors that branched off in all directions. Everything was opulent, the paintings on the walls, the gilded frames, the antique chandeliers hanging from the high ceilings. But beneath the surface, Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house felt too still, too quiet. The air was thick, as if it were holding a secret, waiting for him to discover it. They reached the gardens, and for a brief moment the beauty of the place took Jamal's breath away. The flowers were in full bloom, and the air smelled sweet with the scent of roses and jasmine. It was a stark contrast to the grimy streets of Detroit he had grown up on. But even as he admired the view, something about the place unsettled him. The perfectly manicured lawns, the fountains, the tall hedges, everything felt meticulously planned, like it was all part of a grand design. Evelyn stopped at the edge of the garden and turned to him. "This estate has been in my family for generations, Jamal," she said, her voice low. "It's not just a home, it's a legacy. And now, it's yours too." Jamal frowned. "What do you mean it's mine? I don't even know you." She smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "You will, in time." They spent a few more minutes walking in silence before Evelyn led him back to the house. The staff barely acknowledged them as they passed, all of them moving with the same eerie detachment. Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that they were all in on something he didn't understand. That evening they sat down to dinner, just the two of them. The grand dining room was eerily silent, the only sounds coming from the clink of silverware against fine china. Jamal barely touched his food, lost in thought. But Evelyn ate slowly, her movements deliberate, as if savoring every bite. "You've been quiet tonight," she said after a while, her voice almost too soft. "Is something wrong?" Jamal hesitated, his fork hovering over his plate. "I'm just trying to understand all of this," he said, his voice thick with confusion. "You married me for what? To give me a better life? What's really going on here?" Evelyn set down her wine glass and leaned back in her chair, regarding him carefully. "You've been asking the right questions, Jamal, but the answers will come in time. The marriage, the estate, everything, it's all connected. I just need you to trust me." Jamal stared at her, still unsure, but there was something in her eyes, something that made him wonder if he was already in too deep to back out. The next day, after breakfast, Evelyn took him on a tour of the estate, showing him the various rooms that made up the mansion. There was the library, the indoor greenhouse, the wine cellar, and even a room she called the Velvet Room. "I'm not supposed to go in there, am I?" Jamal asked, his curiosity getting the best of him. Evelyn's eyes hardened. "No," she said firmly. "That room is off limits. You'll understand why eventually." But Jamal wasn't the kind of person to leave things alone. There was something about the Velvet Room that intrigued him. He noticed that every time they passed it, Evelyn's posture would stiffen, and she would quickly change the subject. Something was hidden in there, something important, and Jamal was determined to find out what it was. But before he could make a plan, he was distracted by a strange feeling that had been building since he had entered the mansion, the feeling that he wasn't alone. It wasn't the kind of loneliness that comes with being isolated. It was the kind that came with the feeling that someone, or something, was always watching. That night, he lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, that the quiet mansion would soon reveal its darkest secrets. Jamal was in for a shock, one that would change everything he thought he knew about the woman he had married and the mansion that now held him captive. But for now, the house remained silent, waiting. The Velvet Room and the forgotten secrets. The days following their unusual marriage settled into an eerie calm. Marcus tried to convince himself that everything would be all right. He had a comfortable home, food at his disposal, and a bank account that was no longer empty. Evelyn kept her distance as promised. The house was quiet, and Marcus spent most of his time exploring the mansion, trying to fill the awkward silence that stretched between him and his much older wife. But the longer he stayed there, the more unsettled he felt. Something about the place felt off, like the house was holding its breath. On the 6th day, Marcus woke up early, feeling restless. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was hidden in that mansion, something that wasn't meant for him to find. He had already explored every corner of the estate except for one place, the Velvet Room. Evelyn had mentioned it only once, a room she had specifically told him not to enter. But every time he passed by it, the curiosity gnawed at him like a rat in the walls. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Marcus made up his mind. He was going to find out what was behind that door. It wasn't just about defying Evelyn's rules. It was about the growing unease he felt, the strange sounds he heard at night, the unsettling whispers in the halls, and most of all, the presence of those photos of him, photos taken before he even knew Evelyn. Silently, Marcus slipped out of his bed and crept through the long, dark corridors. The mansion was cold at night, and the air smelled faintly of something old, like dust and forgotten history. He moved carefully, trying not to make a sound. The hallways twisted in strange ways, as though the house itself didn't want him to get to the velvet room. He reached the door. It was deep red, almost crimson, and there were strange, swirling patterns carved into the wood, giving it an otherworldly appearance. Marcus hesitated for a moment, feeling his heart thumping in his chest. His hand hovered over the doorknob before he took a deep breath and turned it. The door creaked open. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a chandelier with red-tinted bulbs that flickered faintly, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. Velvet curtains, rich and heavy, lined the walls, and the scent of old wood and incense lingered in the air. It was a strange, unsettling place, beautiful, yet suffocating. In the center of the room stood an altar. It was made of dark stone and looked ancient, its edges worn down with time. Around it were photographs of him, not from the wedding, but from his life before Evelyn. There were pictures of him working at the garage, walking home from work, sitting on the steps of his old apartment. His gut clenched. How had she gotten these? How long had she been watching him? His eyes then fell upon a large leather-bound book lying on the altar. The book was old, its pages yellowed with age. Curiosity pulled him toward it, and despite the warning bells ringing in his mind, he opened it. On the second page, there was a drawing, a sketch of a boy, of him, the same face, the same eyes. Below the sketch, a cryptic note read, Subject 27, Bloodline Extension Candidate, Acquired, Monitor for Traits, Prepare for Activation. The words felt like a punch to the stomach. Marcus's hands trembled as he shut the book, heart racing. What the hell was this? Before he could process what he had just seen, he heard a whisper behind him. The voice was calm, almost serene. You weren't supposed to see that. Marcus spun around, eyes wide. There in the doorway stood Evelyn. But she didn't look like the woman he had married. The elegance, the grace, the control, everything was gone. Her eyes were sharp, almost predatory, and her expression was darker than anything Marcus had ever seen. She stepped into the room slowly, her gaze fixed on him. You found it, she said, her voice low and steady. I knew you would. Marcus backed away, his mind racing. What is this? What do you want from me? His voice was strained, and the words felt foreign on his tongue. This wasn't what he had signed up for. This wasn't just a marriage for convenience. There was something darker at play here, something that ran deeper than he could have ever imagined. Evelyn's lips curled into a small smile, but it wasn't the warm, kind smile he had seen in the beginning. It's not just a marriage, Marcus. It's a bloodline. She paused, her gaze hardening. You're part of something much bigger than yourself. Marcus's mind was reeling. His breath was shallow. What do you mean? Your father, Evelyn said, her voice almost a whisper. He was never who you thought he was. He was part of this legacy, a legacy I've been building for generations. And now, Marcus, you're the last piece of the puzzle. You've been chosen. Your blood is the key. He shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. I don't understand. I don't even know my father. He left me when I was just a kid. Evelyn stepped closer to him, her presence suffocating. Your father was my husband's illegitimate son. When he ran away, he tried to erase his bloodline. He tried to hide you, but I never forgot. And now, you are the heir, the last living heir to the Harrington family. Marcus felt as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath him. He could hardly breathe. No, this can't be real. This is crazy. Evelyn nodded slowly, her expression unwavering. It's very real, Marcus. This house, this bloodline, it's older than you can possibly imagine. We've made deals, we've bound ourselves to powers that are older than time itself. And now, it's your turn. It's your destiny. Marcus's mind spun in circles, unable to grasp the gravity of the situation. He turned to run, but something stopped him. The house seemed to close in around him. The walls felt alive, pulsating with an energy he couldn't explain. Doors that were once open were now sealed shut. Rooms he had explored hours earlier seemed unfamiliar, twisted. Evelyn's voice followed him as he ran. You can't escape, Marcus. You belong to us. You always have. But Marcus wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. He didn't know how to escape, but he knew he had to try. He wasn't going to be anyone's pawn. Not again. The inescapable bloodline. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he ran through the endless hallways of the Harrington mansion. He didn't understand how the house had changed. One moment, the rooms were spacious and familiar. but now they twisted, bending in unnatural angles. The doorways he had passed through earlier had somehow disappeared, leaving only a maze of dark, foreboding corridors. His breath came in shallow bursts as he tried desperately to find a way out. But the house, no, the mansion, felt like it was closing in on him, swallowing him whole. "Marcus," Evelyn's voice echoed through the mansion, soft but eerily clear. "There's no escape. You've always belonged here." He ignored her, desperation fueling his every step. But no matter how many corners he turned, the house seemed to stretch out in impossible directions. It was like the mansion itself was alive, responding to his every move. The silence in the air was suffocating, broken only by his rapid footsteps and the distant sound of music playing from the farthest wing of the house, faint and haunting, just like the shadowy figure in the velvet room. Marcus's mind raced. What was going on? Was this some kind of twisted dream? He couldn't understand how his life had gone from surviving in the projects to being trapped in a mansion, forced into a marriage with a woman who seemed to know everything about him, his past, his bloodline, and his future. And what was it about that bloodline? What power did it hold? He reached a dead end in the hallway, the walls pressing in on him. His chest tightened, panic creeping in. He turned back, but there, standing in the doorway at the end of the hall, was Evelyn. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as if she were waiting for him, knowing that he would eventually run out of options. "You can't outrun fate, Marcus," she said, her voice smooth, almost soothing. "You belong to this house, to this bloodline. The moment you said yes to the marriage, you sealed your fate." Marcus stepped back, his hand fumbling for something, anything that could help him escape. He had no idea how to fight against something as powerful as this. He had no allies, no friends, no family to turn to. All he had was this mansion, this woman, and the haunting legacy that he had been dragged into. "No," he gasped, shaking his head. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't choose this life." Evelyn's eyes softened, but only for a moment. Then, her expression hardened again, as though she was already tired of his resistance. "You never chose it. It chose you, Marcus. And now you have a role to play. You can try to run, but you'll never escape. This bloodline is everything." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as Evelyn's words sunk in. The weight of what she said settled on him like a crushing burden. He had no way of knowing exactly what she meant, but he knew one thing for sure. He was being drawn into something much darker and more dangerous than he could have imagined. This wasn't just a marriage. This was a legacy, a centuries-old power that was now his responsibility. "Where's the door?" Marcus demanded, his voice cracking with frustration. "Where's the exit?" Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she took a step forward, her pace slow and deliberate, as though she were savoring every moment of his fear. "The house doesn't let people leave, Marcus. Not once they've accepted their place in it. You are part of this now. You always have been. Your father was the first to break the pact, but now it's your turn." Marcus clenched his fists, fighting against the rising panic. He had to find a way out. He couldn't be trapped here forever. His life, the life he had fought for, was slipping away from him with every passing minute. "Your father didn't just abandon you, Marcus," Evelyn continued, her voice growing colder. "He betrayed us. He ran away with a servant trying to escape the bloodline. But we always knew where he was. We always knew that one day you would return, that you would take your place as the heir to the Harrington legacy." "Why?" Marcus gasped. "Why me? Why now?" "Because you are the last of the bloodline," Evelyn said, her voice steady and calm. "The Harrington legacy must pass down to each generation. A bloodline cannot survive without an heir, without a successor. And now that responsibility falls to you." She moved closer, her presence overwhelming. "But don't worry, you won't be alone. We are a family. We always take care of our own. And now, you're a part of it." Marcus's heart hammered in his chest as he realized the depth of what he was being told. He wasn't just a pawn in some twisted game. He was the key to an ancient contract, an ancient curse that had been passed down through generations of the Harrington family. His father had tried to run from it, but now it was his turn to accept it. He was the last heir to the bloodline, and whether he liked it or not, he was bound to this legacy. "No," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't want this. I never asked for this." "You never had a choice," Evelyn said, her voice firm and final. "And now, Marcus, it's time for you to learn what it means to be a Harrington." The walls around them seemed to close in even tighter, the air growing thick with an energy that Marcus couldn't explain. He felt as though the house itself was alive, watching, waiting for something to happen. He backed away, his mind racing. He didn't know what to do, where to go, or who to trust. But one thing was clear. He couldn't stay here. Not like this. He couldn't let himself be consumed by this legacy, this curse. He had to find a way to break free. "Where is it?" he demanded. "Where's the way out?" Evelyn's smile was cold, almost pitying. "There is no way out, Marcus. Not for you, not anymore. You are the last piece of the puzzle. The bloodline must continue, and now you are the one who will carry it." Marcus felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. There was no escape. He had no choice but to play along, at least for now. But deep down, he vowed that he would find a way out. He couldn't let this be his life. He couldn't let himself become just another piece in the Harrington legacy. The forbidden ritual. Marcus sat alone in his room that night, his hands trembling as he gripped the leather-bound book he had stolen from the velvet room. He had not spoken to Evelyn since their last confrontation. The air in the mansion felt heavy, as though the very walls were pressing in on him. The mansion, with its beautiful exterior and ancient furniture, now felt more like a prison than a home. The whispering voices that he had heard earlier in the hallways had become louder, more distinct. He could almost feel them inside his head now, murmuring warnings, promises, and threats. They were the voices of the house, the spirits that had lived there long before him, bound by ancient rituals and contracts. The same rituals that Evelyn had spoken of, the bloodline, the sacrifice, the curse. Marcus had never believed in such things, but now, standing at the heart of the mansion, he wasn't so sure anymore. He flipped open the book again, his eyes scanning the cryptic words written in elegant, old-fashioned script. The pages were thick and worn, yellowing with age, yet the words remained clear. The further he read, the more he understood that this was no ordinary family legacy. The Harringtons had been involved in something much darker, something that had lasted for centuries. They had made deals with powers far beyond their control, and now Marcus was the one who would bear the weight of it all. A name caught his eye on the page: the Eternal Heir. The description beneath it read, "The Eternal Heir is the final vessel, the one who carries the bloodline's curse. Their union with the Chosen One marks the end of the bloodline's cycle, ensuring the continuation of the family's legacy." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Was he truly the one they had been waiting for? The heir who would bind the family to its fate forever? Suddenly, the door to his room creaked open. He jumped, dropping the book onto the floor, and turned to see Evelyn standing in the doorway. Her presence, once graceful and calming, now seemed menacing. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her without a sound. "I see you've been reading," she said softly, her voice like velvet. "It's a lot to take in, isn't it?" Marcus stood up quickly, backing away from her. "You lied to me, Evelyn. All this time you've been using me. You've been planning this from the start." Evelyn's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't the warm, inviting smile he had seen when they first met. It was something colder, darker. "You're not as naive as I thought. Yes, I've been planning this. But it's not about using you, Marcus. It's about saving you." "Saving me?" he spat, incredulous. "From what? From this curse? From being a pawn in your twisted game?" Evelyn walked closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You still don't understand. The Harrington legacy isn't a game. It's a burden, a responsibility, and now it's yours." Marcus clenched his fists, trying to fight down the panic rising in his chest. "I won't do it. I won't be a part of this." "You don't have a choice," Evelyn said, her voice low and dangerous. "You are already bound by blood. You always have been. The marriage was just the beginning. The ritual must be completed. You must accept your place in the family." "The ritual?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking. "What do you mean?" Evelyn smiled again, this time a sad, almost regretful expression on her face. "The ritual that will make you the eternal heir, the one who will carry on the bloodline. It's the final step, the one that will bind us forever. It's not just a ceremony. It's a pact, a sacrifice that must be made to ensure the family's survival." Marcus felt his stomach twist. "Sacrifice? What kind of sacrifice?" Evelyn's gaze hardened. "A life, Marcus. A life to feed the bloodline. It's always been this way. Every generation must offer something, someone, to keep the family alive, to keep the legacy strong." Marcus recoiled in horror. "You can't be serious." "You're telling me that you've been using me to carry on the family's legacy?" Evelyn finished for him. "Yes, Marcus. And now, you must complete the ritual. You must become the eternal heir." "No!" Marcus shouted, his voice rising in panic. "I won't do it! I won't let you do this to me!" Evelyn's expression softened, but only for a moment. "You don't have a choice," she repeated, her voice colder than ever. "You were chosen long before you were born. Your blood runs through the Harrington veins. You are the last of the line. You are the only one who can complete this cycle." "I won't," Marcus said, his voice trembling with defiance. "I won't be your sacrifice. I'll destroy this bloodline if I have to." Evelyn's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "You don't understand, Marcus. You think you can escape, but you can't. The house is alive. It knows what you are. It knows your blood. It will not let you leave." Marcus backed away, his mind racing. The house? Alive? The thought seemed impossible, yet somehow it felt true. The strange occurrences, the voices, the way the mansion seemed to shift and move. What if it was all connected to the bloodline? What if the house was part of the curse, a living vessel that had been waiting for him to fulfill his destiny? But what if he could break free? What if he could destroy the bloodline, end this nightmare once and for all? His eyes fell on the lighter in his pocket, the same lighter he had used to burn the book earlier. He had the power to destroy it, to break the chain that had bound him to this legacy. He didn't know how, but he knew one thing. He had to try. Evelyn stepped forward, her hands reaching out, her fingers brushing his cheek with an unsettling tenderness. "It's too late, Marcus. You can't run. You are mine now, and the house will never let you leave." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." With a sudden burst of energy, he turned and bolted out of the room, his heart racing. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away. He had to break free from Evelyn, from the mansion, from everything. As he ran down the hallway, the mansion seemed to shift once more, the walls narrowing, the doors closing in on him. It was as though the house was alive, responding to his every move, trying to trap him. But Marcus wouldn't give up. Not yet. He had a plan, and he was going to make it work. He reached the east wing of the house, the place Evelyn had warned him to stay away from. The door to the velvet room stood before him, locked. But Marcus didn't hesitate. He pulled the lighter from his pocket and set the tip of it against the doorframe. The flames caught almost immediately, licking the wood, burning away the ancient wood that held the room shut. The final confrontation. The once grand mansion stood eerily silent as Marcus paced through the hallways, the weight of Evelyn's cryptic words pressing down on him. He couldn't escape the feeling that something was wrong, something dark and ancient was awakening in the house. The air seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment, and every creaking floorboard beneath his feet only amplified the tension building within him. The velvet room, the place he had dared to enter the night before, was still fresh in his mind. The photos of him scattered across the altar, the chilling book detailing the Harrington bloodline, it all pointed to one terrifying truth. Marcus wasn't just a poor mechanic from Detroit anymore. He was part of something far more dangerous, far more insidious than he could have ever imagined. As he clutched the leather-bound book in his hand, his mind raced. The words etched within its pages. Subject 27, Bloodline Extension Candidate. It was like a hammer to his skull. His life, his very identity, had been manipulated from the start. Evelyn had used him, but more than that, she had tricked him into believing he was a mere pawn in her game. But he wasn't just a pawn. He was the final heir, the last piece of a puzzle that had been decades in the making. And now he was staring down the very core of that evil. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion itself was alive. The longer he stayed, the more he felt like he was suffocating under the weight of its secrets. Every hallway he walked down seemed to stretch endlessly, and every door he opened led him further into a labyrinth that had no end. The mansion seemed to respond to his every movement, almost as though it were trying to trap him, to keep him here forever. The walls groaned and the floors trembled as he passed through them. A sudden cold draft swept through the corridor, and Marcus shuddered. He was being watched. There was no denying it now. He could hear faint whispers echoing through the empty halls, but when he turned to look, there was no one there. The eerie sounds only heightened his sense of dread. In the distance, he could hear the soft sound of piano music, a melody that seemed to come from nowhere, filling the mansion with an unsettling calm. It was the same song that had been playing the night he first arrived, but now it felt distorted, as if it were coming from somewhere deep within the house. He couldn't ignore it any longer. The truth was clear. The mansion, the Harringtons, and everything he had experienced over the past few days were all part of a much darker plan. The bloodline that Evelyn had mentioned. It wasn't just a family tree, it was a contract, a curse that had been passed down through generations. It wasn't long before Evelyn appeared at the end of the hallway, her silhouette framed by the soft light from the windows. But she wasn't the elegant, composed woman Marcus had married. There was something otherworldly about her now. Her skin seemed smoother, almost glowing in the dim light. Her eyes, once cold and calculating, now had an unsettling gleam, like they were no longer fully human. "You're here," she said, her voice calm yet tinged with something darker. "I knew you would be." Marcus stood frozen, clutching the book to his chest. "What the hell is happening here, Evelyn? What is this place? What is your true purpose?" Evelyn took a slow step forward, her presence more imposing than before. "You should have understood by now. You've been chosen, Marcus. Your blood is the key to our survival. My survival." "What do you mean?" Marcus's voice shook, his hands trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. She smiled, a smile that held no warmth. "I am the last of the Harrington family, the keeper of this legacy, and you are the final piece, the last heir who will carry the bloodline forward. I didn't want this life for you, but it's what you were born into." Marcus felt his stomach churn. He wanted to run, to escape the suffocating grip of the mansion, but he knew it was too late. He was already trapped. "The bloodline," he muttered, staring down at the book in his hands. "The contract. It's all real. You used me." Evelyn stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. "You were always meant to be mine. All of this, the marriage, the house, the power, it's part of the plan. The bloodline demands a sacrifice every generation, and now it's your turn to carry the legacy." Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. "No, I won't be your pawn." But Evelyn only chuckled softly, as if the very idea of his defiance was amusing. "You don't have a choice, Marcus. You never did." As Evelyn's words sank in, a strange feeling overtook Marcus. The ground beneath him began to tremble once again, more violently this time. The whispers grew louder, and suddenly he heard something else. A voice. It wasn't Evelyn's. It was something older, deeper, more primal. He turned toward the source of the sound, his body frozen in terror. The walls of the mansion seemed to ripple, the air thick with an ominous energy. A shadow began to emerge from the farthest corner of the room, a dark, formless figure that seemed to stretch and shift, its presence overwhelming. "You carry the blood," the voice boomed, echoing through the hall. "You cannot run from it." Marcus staggered back, his legs weak beneath him. "What are you?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the thunderous pounding of his heart. The shadow seemed to grin, its shape becoming clearer. It was a figure without a face, a being of pure darkness, and as it moved toward him, the air grew colder. "I am the keeper of this legacy. I am the one who feeds on the bloodline, and now, Marcus, you belong to me." Marcus's mind raced. He couldn't let this happen. He had to find a way to break the curse, to free himself from the grip of the Harrington family's twisted legacy. And then it hit him. The book. The leather-bound book that had haunted him since the moment he'd laid eyes on it. He pulled the book from his pocket, his hands shaking. The words inside were his only chance. If he could destroy the book, he might be able to destroy the bloodline, the curse, and the shadow that was closing in on him. With trembling fingers, Marcus lit a lighter and held it to the edge of the book. The flames flickered, and for a brief moment, Marcus thought he was imagining it. But then, the fire caught, and the book began to burn. "No!" Evelyn screamed, her voice cracking with fury. "You can't do this! You'll ruin everything!" But Marcus didn't listen. He held the book above the flames, watching as the pages burned away. The shadow recoiled, its form flickering in and out of existence. The walls of the mansion shook violently, and Marcus felt a surge of energy course through him. For the first time since he'd entered this house, he felt like he had control. He wasn't a pawn anymore. He was the one with the power, the unveiling of truth. The air in the mansion felt heavier than ever before. The walls, once towering symbols of power and wealth, now seemed like a prison that Marcus couldn't escape from. With every step he took, the mansion seemed to close in on him, like a living, breathing entity that fed off the pain of its inhabitants. The morning after his discovery in the Velvet Room, everything had shifted. He had uncovered the truth, but the knowledge felt more like a curse than a revelation. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed in the room that had become his cage. The book he had stolen from the Velvet Room was open on the floor before him. The strange, dark text still burned his eyes, the words scrawled in ink that seemed to move like shadows. Subject 27. Bloodline extension candidate. Prepare for activation. The words swam in his mind, repeating over and over, drowning out everything else. He couldn't focus. He couldn't breathe. What had he gotten himself into? Evelyn's cold smile haunted him, her voice echoing in his ears as she whispered, "You're the last heir to the Harrington dynasty." Her words felt like a slap in the face, a betrayal that ran deeper than anything he could have imagined. His father, the man who had abandoned him when he was just a child, had been a part of this cursed bloodline. His entire existence had been tied to this dark legacy that he didn't ask for, a legacy that had been handed down through generations, sealed with blood and sacrifice. As Marcus paced the room, he tried to make sense of it all. He had never believed in fate, never thought his life was meant to be anything more than a struggle to survive. But now, it seemed his entire existence had been orchestrated, from the moment he was born to the day he met Evelyn. She had manipulated him, used his desperate circumstances to lure him into her web, all for the sake of the Harrington bloodline. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. Marcus froze. It was too quiet, too still. When Evelyn was near, the house felt like it was holding its breath. She had been distant the past few days, but he knew she was always watching, always waiting for the right moment to strike. He opened the door cautiously, his eyes meeting those of Mitchell, the driver who had been at Evelyn's side since the beginning. The man was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He had always been a ghost, barely noticeable, but now Marcus could see something different in his eyes. There was fear there, a flicker of something that made his gut twist. "Marcus," Mitchell began, his voice low, "I think you need to come with me. There's something you need to see." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. Something in Mitchell's voice told him this wasn't just another one of Evelyn's cryptic commands. This was something important, something that could change everything. Without saying another word, Marcus followed Mitchell down the long hallway, past the heavy oak doors and grandiose portraits that lined the walls. The house felt even more oppressive now, like the air had grown thick with the weight of its secrets. Mitchell led him to the east wing, the area Evelyn had warned him never to enter. Marcus had spent days trying to avoid it, trying to ignore the feeling of something calling to him from the shadows. But now, he had no choice. He had to know the truth. They stopped in front of a door that was unlike any other in the mansion. It was old, made of dark wood that had been carved with intricate symbols Marcus didn't recognize. The door itself seemed to pulse with a strange energy, like it was alive, waiting for someone to open it. Mitchell turned to him and hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether to proceed. "You have to understand, Marcus," Mitchell said quietly. "This is bigger than you think. Evelyn has been doing this for years, but you were never meant to know this much. No one was. But now, it's out of her control." Marcus didn't say anything, his mind racing. He had to see what lay behind that door. Whatever it was the last piece of the puzzle. He had to know. With a steady hand, Marcus reached for the door handle, feeling the cool metal under his fingers. As soon as he turned it, a low creak echoed through the hall, and the door slowly swung open. Inside was a room that looked like something out of a nightmare. The walls were lined with shelves, each filled with objects that looked ancient and cursed. Vials of dark liquids, strange symbols etched into glass, and old books that seemed to pulse with power. In the center of the room stood a large pedestal, and on top of it, a single object, an ornate gold box. It was the kind of box you'd see in an ancient temple, something that held untold power. Marcus felt his heart race as he approached the pedestal. There was something about the box that called to him, a force he couldn't resist. He reached out and touched it, his fingers trembling as he lifted the lid. Inside, there was a single piece of paper, yellowed with age. The words were written in the same dark ink he had seen in the book from the Velvet Room. As he read the words, his blood ran cold. The final heir must complete the binding before the 7th day. Failure to do so will result in the collapse of the Harrington bloodline. The sacrifice must be made. A soul for a soul. Marcus dropped the paper, his hands shaking. He couldn't believe what he was reading. The Harrington bloodline wasn't just about power. It was about survival, about feeding something ancient and evil that demanded a price for its existence. And he was the final piece, the one who had to complete the ritual before the curse consumed them all. He turned to Mitchell, his voice barely a whisper. What is this? What is Evelyn really doing? Mitchell stepped back, his face pale. She's not just prolonging her life, Marcus. She's feeding something. Every generation, every heir. It's a pact, a curse that's been passed down for centuries. And now, it's your turn. Marcus felt his stomach churn. He had been a pawn in this twisted game all along, a mere tool for Evelyn's dark plans. The legacy she had promised him was nothing but a lie. The wealth, the power, the security, all of it was a trap. He had to get out, he had to stop this. But Evelyn was too powerful, and the house was alive with the weight of its history. Mitchell stepped closer, his eyes wide with fear. Marcus, you can't escape it. You have to face it. It's the only way. Marcus shook his head, a surge of anger and desperation flooding through him. I won't be part of this. I refuse. But as he turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening noise. Marcus spun around, heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't alone anymore. The air grew colder and the shadows in the room seemed to stretch, becoming more alive than ever before. Behind him, the whispers grew louder. You are the heir, Marcus. You are the one who must feed the bloodline, breaking the curse. Marcus stood frozen in the middle of the mysterious room. The door slammed shut behind him, the echo reverberating through his bones. He could hear the whispers growing louder, closer. It was as if the walls were alive, breathing with a malevolent energy that he couldn't escape. You are the heir, Marcus, the whispers hissed. The bloodline calls for you. You must feed it. Complete the ritual. His heart pounded in his chest, a heavy drumbeat of panic. The walls seemed to close in, and the shadows grew darker, almost alive. Every inch of his body screamed to run, to escape, but the door was locked, and there was no way out. He was trapped. Behind him, a voice cut through the darkness. You can't run from it. Marcus turned slowly to find Evelyn standing in the doorway, but she was no longer the elegant, poised woman he had married. The transformation was grotesque, her face twisted into something unrecognizable. Her skin seemed tighter, smoother, but there was an unnatural gleam in her eyes. Her once silken hair was now dark and thick, flowing like a river of night, and she smiled at him with an eerie calmness. You've been planning this all along, Marcus gasped, his voice hoarse, filled with disbelief. Evelyn stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring every moment. I didn't plan it, Marcus. It's been destined. The Harrington bloodline is bound by something older than you can understand. Your father ran from it. Your grandfather did the same. But you were always meant to finish what they started. You are the final piece. Marcus shook his head in horror. No, I won't be a part of this. I won't be your sacrifice. I'm not your heir. Evelyn's eyes flashed with something sharp, something cold. You're wrong. You have no choice. The bloodline demands a life for a life, a soul to sustain its power. The room seemed to close in even tighter. The shadows twisted, and Marcus felt like he was suffocating. The whispers became frantic, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Marcus, it's time. No! He shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. He was desperate now, adrenaline surging through his veins. He looked around the room, his eyes wild, searching for anything that could help him. The leather-bound book from the velvet room lay on the pedestal, the symbol of his curse. He reached out toward it, trembling. If there was any chance, any glimmer of hope, it had to be in that book. His fingers brushed against the pages, and the room seemed to shudder. Stop! Evelyn cried, but her voice held no authority now. It was desperate, almost pleading. Marcus opened the book, the pages flipping wildly as if they had a mind of their own. He found the passage he was looking for, the one that held the key to the curse. It was written in the same strange dark ink. The bloodline shall continue, but only when the final heir accepts their fate. To break the curse, the bloodline must be severed, the soul freed. Only the fire can destroy the bond. The soul must burn to end the ritual. His heart raced as the words burned in his mind. The fire. He had to destroy the bond. The curse could only be broken by fire. The realization hit him like a wave of relief and terror all at once. The shadows were closing in, and Evelyn was right behind him now. He could feel the weight of her presence, the cold breath of the curse that had surrounded him since the moment he stepped into this mansion. There was no time left. He had to act. Without thinking, Marcus grabbed the lighter from his pocket, the same one he had kept since his days on the streets. The one thing that had always given him a sense of control, no matter how chaotic life had been. He flicked the lighter, and the flame sparked to life, casting a soft light in the otherwise dark room. Evelyn's eyes widened in shock, and she took a step back. "No, Marcus, you don't understand. You can't destroy it. You can't—" Marcus didn't listen. With a fierce determination, he dropped the lighter onto the book, watching as the flame caught the edges of the pages. The fire spread quickly, devouring the cursed text. As the fire grew, so did the room's reaction, walls groaning, the air thickening. The mansion seemed to howl in protest. "No, stop!" Evelyn screamed, her voice cracking as the flames began to consume everything. But Marcus didn't stop. The book burned hotter, the flames dancing higher as the curse began to unravel. And then, in a flash of searing light, the mansion trembled, the very foundation of the Harrington legacy cracking under the weight of its dark history. Evelyn's scream was cut short as she was enveloped by the fire, her body twisting and contorting in a way that wasn't human. Her form shattered, turning to ash, and with her, the bloodline was severed. The mansion, the legacy, and the curse, all of it, collapsed. The room went silent. The air cleared, the oppressive weight lifting, and for the first time since Marcus had stepped into this hellish place, he could breathe. He stood there panting, the lighter still in his hand, watching as the last embers of the book turned to ash. The walls, once so imposing, now stood empty, hollow, silent. Marcus stumbled backward, his legs weak. He had done it. He had broken the curse. But at what cost? The mansion was gone. Evelyn was gone. The dark legacy that had haunted his every step had been destroyed. As he walked through the wreckage of the mansion, the feeling of being trapped slowly faded. The whispers were gone, and for the first time in his life, Marcus felt free. He stumbled out into the daylight, his body sore and his mind reeling. He had lost everything. But in the end, he had gained something far more valuable. He had gained his freedom. 2 days later, he woke up in a small, unfamiliar bed in a hospital room. His body was bruised, his skin singed from the fire, but he was alive. Luan, his childhood friend, was sitting beside him, looking worried but relieved. "They found you in the wreckage of the mansion," Luan said softly. It's all gone. The estate, Evelyn, all of it. There's no record of her anywhere. No marriage certificate. She's gone. Like she never existed." Marcus blinked, trying to process it. He had expected to find the world in ruins, but now it seemed like it had all been erased, as if Evelyn had never been real. With a deep breath, Marcus slowly sat up in bed. "It's over," he whispered. "It's really over." He spent the next few months rebuilding his life. The man who had once been a pawn in a twisted game of power and legacy now stood free, able to forge his own path. He moved away from Detroit, started a new garage in Atlanta, and tried to leave the past behind him. But even now, every so often, when he passed an old mirror or heard the sound of jazz music playing on the radio, he could still feel her presence. Evelyn, the bloodline, the curse. He couldn't forget it, no matter how hard he tried. Some legacies don't die easily, some curses don't sleep, and sometimes, no matter how far you run, the past will always be a part of you. But Marcus had learned something important, the power to break free from the chains of destiny, to reclaim your life, no matter the cost. And that, in the end, was worth more than any legacy.